I've wanted to do this video for so long. In fact, I've wanted to do many tutorial videos, but the problem is brands just keep releasing printers. And let's be honest, that's what people want most from this channel. I've got to accept that. Would you believe there was actually a time last year where I was worried that I'd struggle for content? Now I literally can't get content out fast enough. And seriously, I filmed this back in July. But that's my problem. Your problem, assuming you click the thumbnail of this video, is that you want to know how to get glass clear transparent prints from resin printers. Great, because that's what I'm going to show you today. Hi, I'm Ross and this is Fohammer Videos. So no matter what your application, be it models, sculptures or jewelry, the idea of crystal clear transparent resin is great, right? But the second you actually try to use this stuff, you quickly realize that that vision is marred by issues. Clear resin can turn yellow when exposed to UV light. It can discolor when washed in heavily used isopropanol. But the biggest issue is that even if you get everything right, once you clean it, it turns frosty, and that is far from the desired glass-like result that you actually wanted. So here's your solutions in what I feel is a sensible order. Now, first of all, some clear resins will just turn yellow. It's the nature of many materials. If you want recommendations on good quality resin that won't turn yellow, I'd recommend chatting with people in various groups online and getting a consensus, because I've only used a limited few. In my case, I'm using the PAT 10 resin from Hagears because I'm printing on my Ultracraft Reflex. If you don't know that printer or the newer Reflex RS, I love these machines and they're currently the ones I use for my own personal projects. But I've got to be fair, it's not for everyone. So please check my reviews on both those units for more details. Now first off, this PAT 10 resin, like many others, will actually start to yellow slightly after it's been cured. But when you give it a day or so, it'll actually return back to normal. So if you've got clear resins that are prone to turning a bit yellow, try waiting. That might actually be a test worth doing on those materials too. But that's the summary of step one. Get a clear resin that's still clear after curing, or maybe curing and waiting a bit. The next few steps kind of require us to understand what's happening and why our prints can discolor in other ways or turn frosty, which most will. And I'm sorry if some of you already know this bit, but let's please take a moment for beginners to understand this too. Now, when your print's finished, you probably notice that whilst it's still on the build plate, it is pretty much glass clear, but the second you wash it, frosty. Now, a lot of people, and me included, will assume that this is due to the resin reacting negatively with isopropanol or whatever cleaning fluids we use. It's not. The real reason is that printed models are made up of tiny cubes called voxels, and these voxels on the surface of a model refract light in various directions rather than being a smooth surface you can see through. It's like the difference between a pane of glass you can see through and that same pane crushed into loads of little pieces. You can't see straight through it anymore because it's now a pile of crushed glass with lots of edges. It's no longer a smooth surface. Shrink that down significantly, and it's pretty much the same on 3D printed models. Lots and lots of little cubes means lots and lots of tiny edges. The reason it looks good on the plate is because when a print's completed and is still dripping with residual resin from the tank, you'll notice you can already see through it pretty well, and that's because the liquid resin on the surface is filling all of those tiny gaps and masking all of the edges. So as soon as you wash it, the residual resin on the surface is gone, you can no longer see through your model. So I'm sorry guys, from all the testing I've done on consumer machines, I've not managed to see a single way that I can get them to print a glass clear model in one go. But thankfully, the easiest solution isn't hours of sanding. In fact, there's no sanding needed at all, because if you're printing miniatures or detailed models, let's be fair, sanding those tiny details is next to impossible. What we need to do, and maybe this is still unfortunate, we need to fill those recesses and do what the layer of resin was doing before we washed it off. We just need to do it in a controlled way. Now, another tip I want to give is when printing your models, when you're doing transparent, avoid hollowing where you can. All of the issues outside of the model will duplicate on the model's inner shell too. Things like supports, they'll be visible inside the model, but also, since you can't easily clean the inside or apply what we're about to do, you will still have that frosty surface on the inside too. So yeah, the best tip is to avoid hollowing models for this transparent process. The other issue we get is something we talked about earlier, and that's discoloration beyond just UV yellowing. So I'd also recommend when you clean transparent models, make sure you do it in a clean washing fluid. If you've been using the same stuff for months, you may want to ditch that, especially if you've washed non-clear resins in it, because traces of what is in the washing fluid, being your isopropanol or whatever, can easily discolor your clear resin by dyeing the surface. Or, and if you've been printing a while, you've probably seen this, when isopropanol evaporates and it's been used a lot, it can actually leave traces of the resin in it in the recesses of your model's surface. Once again, that's going to ruin the clear effect that we're going for. And I know some people will say you should sand your models with finer grits of sandpaper, and that will work for larger things, but this process is long, arduous, and as I said, not practical on small, fine detailed models, in my case, miniatures. So, let's say we've got a clean model, which is Frosty, and we don't want to try and sand all the intricate details. What do? Well, as I said, we need to fill those gaps with something clear to bring back the see-through effect. And I tried a few ways. Now, you could just cure your model straight from the plate with excess resin on it. How successful you're going to be is anyone's guess, because, well, you'll have to touch the model to get it to the curing station. And this is also a surefire way to fill in all of the natural shapes that you actually want to keep on your print. I've not personally tested this, but it is potentially doable. What I started with was this product recommended to me by James Taro of taromodelmaker.com. I talk about him a lot on the painting phase, and I've got a video coming about what he does in the future. This is Gauzy Coat from AK Interactive. Gauzy, Gauzy, whatever. This is made for things like Airfix cockpits once they've been sanded. You just dip the part in, shake or wick off the excess and leave it to dry. 20 minutes or so later, do it again, and then again. Maybe 3, maybe 5 times. And this got me decent-ish results, but it's made for hard plastic cockpits, not slightly flexible resin. After a few dips I got okay results, but I wanted better. This is hazy glass, not clear glass. But I figured this Gauzy Coat is just some kind of clear gloss varnish, so I also cracked out some Vallejo polyurethane gloss varnish and put that into my airbrush. Now, I typically use much better airbrushes for painting models, and I'll have some amazing airbrush reviews coming soon, but for varnishes and practice paints that could potentially wreck an airbrush, I default back to this KK Moon unit I picked up on Amazon for about 20 quid 4 years ago. And it's always a smart place to start with an airbrush of this caliber if you've never airbrushed before, because, well, if you wreck it, it's not going to break the bank as much as something like a Harder and Steenbeck Ultra, Evolution, or Infinity. Again, reviews for them coming soon. But the process for using this is just a case of spray it on lightly and slowly build up a smooth, thin coat across all the surfaces. Doing this made me realize I have a new obstacle to overcome: dust. So between my airbrush coats, I decided to leave the part covered. You can use whatever you like, I just used a lid for a small spritz bottle for this mask. Also, this clear mask is part of the Skull Soldier model from Loot Studios. The model's actually a loyalty reward and comes in both 32 and 75mm, and I also have it in statue size. And in this case, despite the render of this model showing a clear mask on the 75mm version, there actually isn't a mask for the 75mm version at all, so I had to download the one from the statue model and guesstimate the size reduction to get it to fit on the 75mm version. I think I got it close enough. Now, spraying the mask with polyurethane varnish and leaving it under its cap gave me better results, but it was still a bit cloudy. Also, I need to say, if you are using an airbrush spray, always wear a mask and have a good ventilation unit. You don't want to be breathing in any of this stuff. I actually use a bench vent extractor unit which pushes fumes outside, and I've already actually done a video for that if you want to check this thing out. It's not cheap, but it's brilliant. Also, while I was spraying, I decided to have a go at spraying on the Gauzy Coat to see if that was any better, but I also used the airbrush just blowing air to try and dry it. Now, unfortunately, this caused it to dry too fast, and the surface started to get micro fractures. It also dried really hard, like clear hard plastic, which makes sense because, as I said before, it's made for plastic canopies rather than slightly flexible resins. And don't worry, I will move away from airbrushing shortly. I know many of you don't have an airbrush, but they are cheaper than most people think to get started with. Again, reviews coming soon. This is meant to be a hobby channel, more than a 3D printing review channel, but as I said, so many printers. Now, I was pretty convinced I could still do better than this, so I grabbed some lacquer-based gloss varnish by a company called Alclad, which I believe now to be HR Hobbies in the UK, but still Alclad in the US. yeah, if anybody knows what's going off with them, please pop it down in the description. But anyway, if you use this stuff and you skip through the video, you most definitely want a mask when you're using this stuff. Now, I've actually done a review of these guys' candy colors before, which, well, for me didn't turn out great, and it turns out I did it wrong. My complaint about the brand was more that when I asked them for advice and what's going off, why am I getting it wrong, they just ignored the problem rather than explain to me how to get the best out of their paints. And that's sad, because now they've ended up with a negative review where there's so many people out there who've had a good experience with them. And I still don't fully understand what I've done wrong. Thankfully, with clear varnish, it's pretty straightforward. Spray it on. But again, this needs to be done in thin coats, super thin. If you want to retain all that detail, if you put too much down in one go, it's just going to run and, well, it'll look awful. So when you're spraying this on, you want a light dusting for the first coat. It might even look more matte, but trust in the process, stick it under something, give it 20 minutes to dry. It might need 3 coats, it might need 5. I can't remember how many I did. I think it was closer to 5. But once you've cracked it, you'll be able to see straight through the part, and you'll notice you've also retained all of the details on that model. So this is where we come away from the airbrush application, and just like I did with the gauzy coat initially, yeah, you can just dip your parts into this stuff. However, it will take days to dry, and I mean days. And as advised before, you will lose detail and probably get some extra build-up on lower edges and some of the recesses. But at least it's doable for those of you who don't want to use an airbrush. For anyone who wants to get closer to an airbrush but not get an airbrush, you can get gloss clear coat spray cans, but again, they don't have such fine control as you get from an airbrush. Once again, it is going to clog some fine details, but it is a workable process. And the reason I wanted to do clear resins like this is because I've printed a ton of special effects parts from Deadly Print Studio, which I hope if you're into the hobby, you've probably seen by watching people like El Miniaturista on his various social channels, because, well, let's be honest, his painting is incredible. But I wanted these to come out in clear so I could apply some translucent colors over the top. But here's the question for you, the audience. How do you think I should do this? Do you think I should apply the color first and then the gloss? Or should I just go back to candy colors because they're both gloss and translucent? Hey, maybe that's a future video idea. But there it is, guys, that's it. There's several ways to get glass clear prints without sanding. If you've got any additional tips, pop them down in the comments. Maybe I could try out some alternative suggestions. But otherwise, I want to say thanks for watching, with a huge thanks going to our members. I'd also like to thank Loot Studios for some of the models used in this video, but I'm paying for them. I actually recommend them because I genuinely think they're some of the best models online. And yes, I do make a commission for everyone who signs up with Loot Studios, but come on, I've been recommending them for a long time before that deal was even in place. So I guess thanks Loot for finally paying me occasionally. Still haven't actually been paid yet. Again, thanks for watching. Please consider joining our members program to get your name up in lights, along with early access and exclusive Discord roles. Thanks again. Until next time, it's amazing what you can do when you don't have to look at yourself in the mirror anymore. Who knows what that's from? And you can't Google it. Fohammer out.